What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel today, where we will be discussing the topic of DJ and producer. Should you do both? Why you gotta do both? It's kind of a question that came up in one of my other socials, but before we jump into things, what I need from you is that SLC. Hit subscribe, like, comment, and more importantly, hit the notifications bell to stay in tune with the new videos that we have up and coming. So point number one is to ask the question of why we're doing the things that we're doing. It's been this long unwritten rule, but I guess it's written somewhere in terms of some of the comments I received on this, that you have to do both DJing and production to sort of make a name for yourself in this industry or in the game of it. And I just thought that was rather interesting, and it made me pause to think,
Why is this fuckery happening?
and wondering where these things come from. And to be able to better understand it, I think we first need to go back and look at the history of things. So point number two is to understand the history of this. It's not unusual that DJs and producers have always had a relationship. I think it starts back as early as the mid to late 70s, when studios and producers were asking DJs to come into the studio and give them some suggestions on mixes. And then came about the 12-inch mix, the 12-inch disco mix coming onto the scene. You know, the Larry Lavins, the Tom Moultons, as well as the Frankie Knuckles were all asked to come into the studio or introduced to the studio with a specific purpose, which was to make better music and better dance floor experiences. And I could say that point rings true through to today, but I'll come back to that a little bit later on. Point number three, I think we have to follow the money in this one and separate art versus the economics. If you go back to like early 2000s, and this came up in a lot of the commentary on the socials, a few woke and up-to-date cats said, no man, this stuff started in the early 2000s with the collapse of the record music industry, when they went out and actively sought to buy Napster, because Napster was in place, being able to allow people to download free music. So the record industry at the time said, you know what, screw this, we're gonna go buy Napster and make sure everything comes through that. But it was poorly executed in the throes of iTunes, with Steve Jobs and the Apple company coming onto the scene and really devaluating the cost of music. You know, songs were available now for as low as 80 to 90 cents to $1. So the record industry was sort of in perils at the time. And even for me as an artist, I was enjoying, you know, pressing up only 2,000 vinyl records and having that money come back to me. And I had no need to go out and necessarily DJ and get out there to make some money, a substantial income. I was happy with producing the records and putting them out and DJing privately, you know, in terms of friends' parties or at homes. And just to continue along the points of about understanding and following the money, we fast forward to 2020 now, and I think some of this was already happening once iTunes clearly was a front leader in the market in terms of where people would buy and consume music. You have Spotify, which, you know, has a very deep and integrated relationship with a lot of major record labels, and they executed much better now, where the thought processes from a label and I guess a promoter perspective and social media as well, sort of underscoring this point. How many Spotify followers do you have? How many tracks you got out? And these are the things that would be considered before a promoter would even consider booking you. You know, like, just give that a thought. Whereas way back in the day, in the mid to late 70s, studios were inviting influential DJs to come in and put their magic on the music. So it's a complete turnaround, but this is happening because of the throes of capitalism and money being involved. And I can go even further to share, based on where the money is going, why we've sort of not only devalued the music, but also, and that's the cost of music, by the way, but we've also devalued the art of DJing in a sense, where you can have a bunch of push play DJs who have people actually building and putting together sets of awful garbage music, and we're making them popular. We're making them the icons of what represents electronic music. I think the narrative is changing a lot, and I could have made my question even more spicy by asking, why do you have to be both a DJ and producer and white? You know? Well, we ain't going to go there today. My whole point on this one is that the economics are what driving the current business environment that we have today when it comes to both skill sets. And point number 4 is already touched on this in the previous point, is the perception of value. I could say that there was a time when I was asked this question of whether you had to be both a DJ and producer to sort of make a name for yourself in the industry. My answer was a unanimous yes, based on purely on the value, where I was saying, a person that's a DJ and producer is doing more. They're putting more forward. They're working harder. And that was wrong for me to do. Really, my focus should have just been on where is the mastery of your skill sets settling with you as an individual. And if you're a DJ, I recognize there's a strong set of skills required to be able to read the room and to be able to make people cry at certain moments in a set. You can't even put a dollar amount on that. That's just God-given skill and talent that, depending on the amount of hours and practice that that individual is putting in, should be recognized specifically for its value. And it was wrong for me to just automatically say, well, I can do both, so I should be getting paid for it. The only people that are saying those who do both should be getting paid more, and this is the sort of barometer or measure in terms of how we'll book DJs, is what the industry is demanding. It's what the PR narrative is. It's no longer going back to the specific roles of producers made the music and DJs amplified it, so to speak, with their skill sets and being able to play such music at the right times. So I would say that's a part of the equation here. There's a perceived value that if you're able to do both, you should get paid for it. And I'm not wanting to take that away from anyone. I'm just letting you know where I think it's come about in terms of the environment we're operating in today. And point number 5 is, I think we as a culture have been successful in doing this as a part of the economic environment driving, the need for a person to have both skill sets in DJing and production, is the fact that there is a divide. You got people picking certain corners in the club where, they're saying, I only DJ, and there's some sort of bitterness attached to that as a result of, I think, the pressure that comes from this new narrative of someone needing to be both a DJ and producer. Like, imagine yourself as a DJ, you love the art of DJing, but you're just not attuned to making beats and sitting in front of a computer screen all day and putting songs together, much less the pain of song arrangement. I can only reflect on my experience of having DJ'd in hip hop first and then moved over to electronic music and played those records. And I think the thing that led me to production was just the fascination of why I liked the songs as much as I did. But the reality is just some people don't find a lot of beauty in sitting in front of a computer screen and creating songs. They rather be in front of people, selecting music and playing them at the right time and bringing joy to people on the dance floor. And I think through the passion of recognizing that particular skill set, as well as the deep passion of producing records from a production perspective and the hours put into both crafts, there has been an unfortunate divide amongst groups that we really need to just stop doing and start celebrating the choices that either artists makes. And when I say artists, I'm talking about DJs versus producers. I see each one as an artist, and we don't sit here as well and say the female DJ or the female producer, which is another stupid, completely asinine part of the equation. Like, we don't talk about female painters and female writers. I'm sure it comes up in some articles, but we respect those individuals specifically for the contributions and the art that they put forward. And that's where we need to fucking start moving this narrative. And we need to start demanding, like, when we're in a position of influence and power, to sort of change this, and I hate to say it, natural divide that we have going on, and really just recognizing people for their arts and skills. We should be amplifying that and pushing that forward as much as possible in everything in which we do to support the culture. And that being said, it leads me to point number 6, which is, when you come out of point number 5 and we're celebrating people for putting up their hands and saying, you know what, I predominantly DJ, and accept the responsibility that comes with that, the economic responsibility that comes with that. When you say, all I'm going to do is DJ and not necessarily produce a lot of records, you need to be comfortable that that demands that you need to stand out very strongly from a DJing perspective because of the environment that we're in today. But at the same time, if you're someone like me, and this is where I'm led down the path of how I feel about the necessity of having both skill sets, is I'm in a place where I believe doing both and making a commitment to mastery in both as much as possible has led me to building up either skill set individually. I can tell you my production has improved insurmountably as a result of DJing a lot more in terms of song arrangement and knowing where to introduce certain instruments and things of that nature, and vice versa, where, because from a DJing perspective, I know when I build certain productions, I just know where I should be introducing things because I want DJs to play these records and to enjoy playing them. So the skill sets, in my point of view, really complement each other. And when you see people doing these things and doing them very well, you should celebrate them rather than looking forward to tearing them down at some point in their careers or making some snarky comment if you're a DJ only purist and you're standing in the corner of the club and looking at that DJ and producer who is doing both relatively well and making snide comments to tear that person down, because it's really not a fallout of them feeling pressured to do both and doing it well. It's really a choice that they made artistically. I mean, I can only speak from my perspective. I think providing adequate commitment to both skill sets has just allowed me to just become a better artist. And that's what we should be celebrating. And conversely, if someone chooses just to do DJing and not much production, celebrate that individual. But I'll tell you this, I am not going to celebrate you and give you enough respect when you as a DJ, because you feel so pressured to put out music, is when you're hiring people to do music for you and you're running around like it is your own fucking music when we know it isn't, and you're acting like you're the shit for music that you haven't actually produced or spent time learning the craft on. I just have zero respect for that. Like, it's no different than, the push play DJs that I was mentioning earlier in the commercial EDM scene, which I think are cancerous overall to electronic music as a whole. So, artistically, in terms of development, when a person chooses to do both and they show adequate commitment to do both well, let's celebrate those things. And as well, when people take up and understand the responsibility of only focusing on one skill set and what that means to them economically, let's just do the best to support one another in each endeavor. So those are my thoughts on it. In today's climate, I think it's obvious the way people are promoting things that both skill sets are needed, but we as a culture could start changing that narrative. And I've seen a lot of great things happen in this last year where that influence is really pushing things forward in a very positive manner. To see someone like Kevin Saunderson do his first, Radio 1 mix, although I think it's ridiculous that it took this long, given he's a pioneer and an innovator, it's happening because of the conversations that we're having as a culture as a whole. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I will definitely make a note to participate in this conversation. I usually get quite involved in the first 24 to 48 hours when posting these videos. Let me know your thoughts. And more importantly, the conversation doesn't have to end here. We have a growing Discord community, and obviously our YouTube channel, and as well our Patreon channel. And you can see at the links in the description below. Much love and respect to you, my purveyors, as well as my patrons on Patreon, Amber, Scooby, Punts, Dave, just to name a few. I respect the support. Much love. Peace.